You think you hate it now, but wait till you drive it.
The Kibbe and Friends Show.
What it is, bro?
Featuring Rob Kibbe.
I don't know how to put this, but I'm kind of a big deal.
Justin Corn Dog Cornett.
New guy's in the corner puking his guts out.
And show producer Bernie McPartland.
This is the DJ 3000, and it has 3 distinct varieties of inane chatter.
Talking cars.
Do you feel this vehicle is safe for highway travel?
Yes, I do.
Diving deep on the topics that matter most.
Just when I think you couldn't possibly be any dumber, you go and do something like this.
And totally redeem yourself!
And the Dukes of Hazzard. Available in iTunes, Stitcher, and whatever else it is you listen on.
Turn up the volume.
The Kibbe and Friends Show.
Kibbe and Friends Show, episode number 108. Available on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, iHeartRadio, Instagram, YouTube, and Patreon. And I'll come back to Patreon because we dropped something very special on Patreon this month. Just Rob here, no Corn Dog, no Bernie. Well, Bernie's editing, but I'm just here solo. This is one of those weird months. It doesn't happen often, but this is a 5-Tuesday month. And we typically record this show on a Tuesday, unless we have to do it on a Monday or a Friday. Usually it's Tuesday, so just stick with me here. We do 3 normal shows a month and a Patreon show. So on these rare occasions where we actually have a 5th week, we don't really have a game plan for that. So look, I'm a podcast fan. I know what it's like to look forward to these every single week, and it's my goal to get one out every single week. So we kind of powwowed, and we brought you some fun stuff this week. So first of all, I have a Finnegan update for you. Called Mike Finnegan in to pinch hit. I think you'll enjoy that. But I'm not going to start with that, and I'm going to end with almost like a 25 or 30 minute interview with Corey Eubanks, Duke stuntman Corey Eubanks, that I did way back in 2011. And I think you're going to really, really enjoy that. But where we're going to start, and if you're one of our Patreon supporters, you know this week we dropped almost a full 1-hour interview with Jack Gill, Dukes of Hazzard stunt legend Jack Gill. Well, he was also on Knight Rider and The Fall Guy and BJ and the Bear. And he's the guy making Fast and the Furious franchises awesome now. He was in Talladega Nights. God bless him. Among other things. But on the Dukes, remember the General Lee jump through the barn? That was Jack Gill. That was in the episode In This Corner, Luke Duke. So we're going to give you a full... If you're on Patreon, you heard the whole thing. We will run an edited version of it in next week's normal show. There are some things that we've agreed to actually pull out for the public release. If you've already heard in the Patreon show, you probably know what I'm talking about. You can get access to our Patreon audience via patreon.com/KF show. And yes, I'm absolutely advertising it. Patreon is where our show and shows like us will really grow in the future. And we're going to start doing some really kick-ass stuff over there. But if you want to hear Jack Gill's full interview, just go to patreon.com/KF show. So I think we'll go ahead and roll to... you know what? Let's do a little preview with Jack Gill. Bernie, will you cue up Jack's little bit on Knight Rider? That should be a good one.
And I got an offer to go do Knight Rider. And when I did, they came and said, look, you're going to come over here and start jumping cars just like you were jumping cars on Dukes of Hazzard. And we're going to pay you 4 times what they're paying now. And so I went to John Schneider and I told him what I was going to do. And I said, look, I hate to leave the show, but we're making 1/3 of what we were making before, and I don't know how many more of these my back can take. Yeah. So if I go over to this new show, are you okay with it? And he goes, yeah, I understand it completely. Don't worry about it. Go ahead and go. We're at the end of our leg anyway. He goes, we've already left the show once, and you're entitled to it. Go ahead and go. So I went over to Dukes of Hazzard, and they filled my spot pretty easily. And when I got over to Knight Rider, I was bringing all of that wealth of information that Paul Baxley gave us to a show that had never heard it before. We used exactly the same formulas for jumping all the ramps and doing everything the same way, but we had a lot less ground clearance on the Knight Rider car than we did in the Dukes of Hazzard. So the cars hit a lot harder, and we're going to cement every single jump, and that hurt a lot more than it did before. But we didn't break our backs. It just hit a lot harder. Yeah. And so I'm glad that they let me go I hate that I had to leave the show, but I like the fact that I brought all that technology to a show without people saying, you can't do that, you can't give up our secrets, because everybody in our community, in the stunt community, knew that we were using the jump vest, and anybody that called, we would tell them exactly how to build the ramps, how much weight to put in the car, how to work the car. It was not a secret among any of the stunt community because we let the information out. So I like the fact that John was open to letting me go, and so was everybody else. Paul wasn't very happy. Paul wanted me to stay on the show because I was the guy that was doing all of the jumps for him at the time. At the time, Alan didn't really want to do the jumps anymore because he had gotten kind of heavy. And so Alan said he wanted me to do the jumps. But when I left the show, we had to bring in Corey Eubanks. And Corey started doing the jumps as well as John Cade because Alan had gotten to a point where his weight, he couldn't get in the car and get in the jump harness anymore. He had done a lot of jump before that. In fact, some of the really big jumps, like over the train, between the train, was Alan. And Alan did the big ones. Yeah. But, he started eating a lot and just got too heavy. A lot of the stuff changed. And when I left the show, Paul was a little mad at me, but he got over it. And the minute the replacements came in, they all did a great job too. So it's not like I was doing anything that nobody else could do, but we broke new ground on Dukes of Hazzard, and we used that technology on Knight Rider and a lot of other shows that we did. We even took it into Fall Guy and into a lot of the shows that you saw. Airwolf was using it, and all the action shows in the 80s were BJ and the Bear, where you were doing everything that we learned from Paul Baxley on Dukes of Hazzard.
There is a early season Knight Rider episode where there's a race, and the Prince brothers drive this orange Dodge Charger. It's a very familiar looking car. It doesn't have numbers on it, though. But we were curious about that. Can you tell us all about that?
Well, we were having a story meeting, and in the story meeting, one of the producers came up and said, well, Jack did Dukes of Hazzard, and, why don't we do something really cool with them racing each other? And they said, well, we can't put an O onto the car, and we can't put a rebel flag on top of the car, but let's see how far we can go with it.
See? Awesome. You can get the whole enchilada. That whole thing is at patreon.com/KF show. Remember, when you're supporting us on Patreon, you're not just putting money in our pockets. You're paying to keep the show going. And every Bernie that produces this show gets a burrito and a Pacifico. Woo-hoo! Come on. Think who you're helping here. Burrito and a Pacifico. Next week, I'm going to give you the full update on my General Lee that's going on at Wormwood Customs. Man, there's a lot going on there. We are in the home stretch. The interior, it's brown. I'm so pumped to have that car back. I need to get fuel injection in it by the end of the month, preferably, because I really want to take it to Mopars in the Park. But we'll talk about all of that next week. Let's go ahead. Speaking of throwing parts on stuff, let's do the Mike Finnegan update presented by, we'll say Finnegan's Garage. We'll go with that. All right, Bernie, roll Mike here. We now welcome back to the show our long-lost great friend, Mike Finnegan. Mike, how are you?
What's up? Doing good. How you doing?
I have a new soundbite for you. I started watching the show Parks and Rec. Have you ever seen that show?
I've seen a couple of episodes of it because there's some really funny people on there, like Nick Offerman and Rashida Jones. Mm-hmm. But haven't watched a bunch of them. I don't get to watch a lot of TV.
This I found on Netflix while I had the flu. I am quite confident you are the character Andy Dwyer, played by Chris Pratt. Let me just give you a little demo so you know what I'm coming from here.
I have no idea what I'm doing, but I know I'm doing it really, really well.
See? That's you.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. It's absolutely perfect. I think this is a show that you would like. So some night or on a plane when you have Netflix access, start with season 2. Just keep going. You will not regret it.
All right. Did you not start with season 1 or what happened there?
No, I was sick and I started with season 2 because I was sick. I didn't know what I was doing.
Oh, okay.
I'm now on my second loop around watching this whole series and memorizing it. My wife likes Ron Swanson because, who's the actor? You just said his name.
Nick Offerman?
Nick Offerman, because he has dimples. She thinks that's all very cute. But anyway, what do you...
That's all that really matters.
That's
happy wife. Happy life.
That's exactly right. What are you doing right now?
Even if you're not the one making her happy.
Well, somebody has to. I did buy her a house. That should go somewhere. We just kind of settled on
it. Is it a nice house?
It's not a bad house. I don't know that it's our dream house.
Did you choose the house, or did you just go, this is what we're getting?
We bought 4 houses, Mike, and withdrew the first one fell through. The second one withdrew an offer. Third one looked good. And then the fourth one popped up, and we liked it better, so we withdrew the offer on the third. And now we've kind of landed on...
Oh, my God, you're that guy. You're the guy that gets the people all excited, like, woohoo, finally we sold our house, we can move on with our lives, and then you bone out on them. Oh, man.
Yeah, that has apparently happened. We are not house people. We don't like this process. This is not for us. We should never be moving. That's just not how it works.
People trying to sell you houses don't like this process anymore either. I think they used to, but then they met you guys.
Our realtor is a pretty nice guy, but I'm quite sure that he is upside down in this process.
Realtors, really? 6%? I mean, what are you really doing for that 6%? Like houses today, you have the power of the internet to spread the word about your house, right? So the realtor is pretty much shuffling paperwork from here to there. And at both ends of that deal, you're paying for that paperwork, like the loan, the fees, the lawyer, all that. And somehow, that guy or girl is collecting 6%. Kind of seems like a lot. I don't know.
Well, the first house that we bought or put an offer on, I just totally did myself. My buddy's a lawyer, so he gave me a purchase agreement, and I just modified it as I needed. And I took it to the lady at the bank that I've done our loans through, and she goes, look, this document that you have, that's pretty much all I need. Your realtor doesn't do anything more than that. And I said, oh, well, that's good to know. But that house fell through. So then we looked at more houses. And then I put my realtor ever hears this, he'll be sad. Behind his back, I put an offer on another house. That was a private sale. And then kind of found out after the fact that the house was a dud. The guy already had 2 other offers, so he just let me out of it. No harm, no foul. But we were starting to get desperate. And that's where the third one came from. I learned a lesson. Never, ever go up against a professor from Iowa State with a degree in supply chain management, because he will eat your lunch. Just FYI.
Did he make you feel inferior as a man who makes his living podcasting?
I don't think he knows what I do for a living, nor does he care. He just wanted my money. Yep.
Enough said, friend. All you can do in that situation is head to a bar, start talking to someone that makes you feel good about yourself, and drink yourself silly. Or buy a house.
Or buy a different house. And the fourth house was the charm. It has a 3-car garage, which is new to me. I've never been able to actually keep any fun car home year round. That's going to be a life changer. And we have 2 showers now. My kids all need to shower a lot.
You get to torture yourself during the winter now. You get to stare at something you can't drive because you live in Iowa.
Well,
but at least you can see your possessions, and your children can shower separately, but at the same time period. It's a big deal.
And I cannot pay to store something, which I'm also looking forward to.
Money ahead now.
Where are you heading this weekend? Nobody will hear this in time, but are you heading to some car show?
Yeah, I'm actually home on a weekend that there is a car show happening, which is remarkable. So I'm going to the Atlanta Motorama, presented by Summit Racing at Atlanta. What is it? Atlanta Motor Speedway? Yeah. It's a huge show from what I'm told. So I'm bringing everything I have, whether it pushes or not, except Blasphemy. Blasphemy is like the one car where it's so unreliable that when there's not an engine in it, I'm not pushing that car. I'm a little bitter about it. But the other ones, like the C10, it's never run. I'll push that all day long. Death Metal Charger ran at one point, kind of like it. I'll push it. Why not? So we're bringing those 2, and my wife's Elko, which I do not have to push, and then Square Force 1 and the OG ramp truck, taking all that stuff. Cleaning out my garage, that's really the reason I'm going to this deal, is they have a swap meet, which means I have zero guilt about loading my entire area with used parts off of my cars and cleaning out my garage because I was running out of room. So I'm blowing everything out, like half off. Like, I'm making deals. I'm stacking them deep, selling cheap. Like, if you buy a T-shirt, I'm giving you a broken Blasphemy piston and connecting rod. You buy a radiator, hell, take 2.
So you would just like to be clean, is that right? Just to unload you have space for new?
It's less about the money. Like, I've already spent that money on this stuff. It's gone. So if I get anything at all, I'm fine. Even if someone just high-fives me and grabs a radiator and walks away, it's like, whatever, dude, get it out of my garage.
This is a good thing. It's good to cleanse. It's good to purge every now and then. What is the status on this Charger? It does not run. Is it ever going to run? What's wrong with it?
It doesn't run. I'm a little concerned because I found metal in the oil filter, But that's not why it's not running. The reason it's not running is I think the ignition module in the distributor died. And so I've ordered another one, hasn't arrived yet. You know what's weird? You can't find that stuff anymore. Like yesterday, I couldn't buy spark plug wires for a big block Chevy at the parts store unless I wanted to assemble them myself, which I didn't have time to do. But you can't, off the shelf, just get a set of cheapy plug wires for a square body Chevy truck with a 454 in it. Nobody had them anywhere near me. They were 30 miles away. And so you also can't get a Mallory Unilite ignition module for a distributor and a Mopar either. So waiting on that, but I think it'll run after that. And hopefully the metal in the oil filter isn't foreshadowing things to come.
Well, usually metal in the oil filter is bad. Is that the first oil change ever?
It's really bad. So I bought the motor used. It was a fresh rebuild from what I understand, but it was used. I guess it had some miles on it. It was the first oil change for me in that motor. And it was more metal than I'd like to see. It wasn't like, oh, God, there goes the main bearings. It kind of looks like distributor gear or worse, but I'm hoping not. We'll see. We'll drive it around if we get it running and change it again and see what happens.
Well, I hope that's all it is the ignition. That seems like a pretty weird thing to die. Wasn't it all brand new stuff? Well, whatever. New stuff breaks all the time.
It was, but what are you going to do?
Nothing. Fix it.
These things happen.
They do happen. What is the deal with your C10?
I'm stoked on that thing. It's in one piece. The sheet metal is on it. It needs steering, exhaust, wiring, and plumbing, and a dry sump tank, and seat mounts, roll cage, sheet metal work, interior paint, registration. Not much, really. I mean, it's close. Let me tell you.
Pretty much done. Yeah.
Yeah, it's practically restored.
Why are you doing that one? Is this another like long lost must complete because I started it type thing, or do you have a event or goal in mind?
Well, I'm completely burnt out on putting all of my efforts into blasphemy. So I decided this summer is the summer I drive the turbo boat and the C10. Everything else takes a back seat to that. For the last few weeks, I've worked on both those things. It's been rad. Me and Newbern have been in the garage getting down. And we'd be a lot further along if things like the mint condition ramp truck didn't just decide to die, you know? That thing died this week, and turns out it's not so mint. It needs a full front suspension rebuild. What else? GM's awesome HEI ignition module, that just died. Yep. Stuff like that. Next thing you know, you're burning up 2 days on something that is mint instead of working on your turbo boat or your C10.
Well, didn't that truck kind of die on you while you were driving it home? Just after purchasing?
Yeah, fuel system. Yeah, fuel system died. Let's make a list of what's died on our mint truck. Winch died, like the second time I used it. Tires popped. Both gas tanks full of rust. Fuel pump push rod ended up being stuck in the engine block, which is why the fuel pump didn't want to work, the mechanical one. HEI module. What else? Oh, AC compressor. Finally decided to turn it on the other day. Things locked up solid. That don't work either.
Nope.
So, yeah, not so mint. However, I still love it because when I look at it, I go, you know what? I don't got to restore this one. Paint the body, on point.
It is a cool-looking truck. It is very cool. Did you get rid of the old red one?
Not yet, because I want to have a shootout between all three of them. I want to make a video for my YouTube channel where I shoot out Big Red, Square Force 1, and the OG ramp truck. So I'm holding on to that one until we get that done.
Does the red one run?
Oh, yeah, it runs and drives. Like, it's been driven all over the place by everybody but me.
Is it a small block or a big block?
It's a small block. Part of the reason I'm getting rid of it is it does need some restoration work. You know, it's a 10-footer, and it's a small block with a Turbo 400 behind it, I think. And so Newbern says it's a 100-footer. But it's a 10-footer with a small block, and it runs and drives and stops. The brakes are actually really good. But I don't want to restore it because you can spend a lot of money restoring something that large, which is why I bought the mint truck, which needs no restoration. So when it breaks down, I'm really not that bummed about it because at least there's no paint and body involved on that one.
That is all true. Oh, I've been meaning to ask you a question about David Newbern specifically. This mask, is he wearing this by choice? Is this is your idea? Can he breathe in this Uncle Bobby contraption?
Weird Uncle Bobby just showed up one day and won't leave. He's not there every day. I don't know. I don't ask why it's happened or what his intentions are towards me. I just stay a safe distance away and laugh. Yeah, I believe he can breathe in that mask.
God, I hope so, because it looks awful. Uncomfortable.
It scares me.
It
scares me. It fits his face. Like, it belongs there. It's weird. And without the mask, he looks like Frank from American Pickers, so... Give me the finger right now. Don't punch a hole in the radiator. Don't do that. I should go before he breaks something.
Well, it's been nice catching with you. I do have one question for you because Avengers comes out this weekend. This is a dad joke. You can use this. You ready?
Okay. Yes.
What is it called when Iron Man does a cartwheel?
I don't know. Iron Maiden?
It's called a Ferris wheel.
Oh, that is bad. And you know what's worse about that being a dad joke is that no child will ever get it. Like Ferris. What? Ferrets?
They may not.
Yeah. Ferris metal. That's a horrible joke. Never tell that again.
Also, Spider-Man, he gets his powers from the World Wide Web. FYI.
That's better. Crappy, but better.
They're all bad. Mike, it's been good talking to you. I will catch up with you later.
Great talking to you, bud. See ya.
Thank you, Mike. He's like bottled fun, right? I miss that guy. We're going to have him on more. I think that we've all agreed that's a good idea. It just puts you in a good mood. But speaking of Avengers jokes, no joke, Avengers is freaking awesome. You need to go see that. We ended up binging on Marvel movies that were on TV last weekend because it was rainy day and there's nothing else to do. Man, it was worth that because when we went and saw Avengers Endgame, that movie is absolutely made for the fans. It's a gift to the fans. And it's 3 hours long, and it could probably be 2, but I'm so glad it's 3. They connect every dot. They give you every Easter egg. They thread everything you hoped for and more. And I was going to tell you who dies, but I'm not that cruel. It's a very fitting end. I'll put it that way. It's a very complete and fitting end. Yes, there's certainly a future, but this chapter, this saga with these characters, it's done. They put a dot at the end, and you will not leave disappointed. There is no end credit scene. You probably know that already, but there is something special at the very, very end. And if you are an Iron Man fan, you'll know what it means when you hear it. You don't see it. So that's pretty good. Okay, back to the show. So let's go ahead and close out here. This is my feature interview with Corey Eubanks from May 2011. This is a steal from the archive. One of the benefits of being in this business for so long is I have got to talk to a lot of people. And on Muscle Car Place, prior to the Kibbe and Finnegan, now the Kibbe and Friends show, I could only get Dukes of Hazzard stuff in like 3 or 4 times a year. And I would, but you can't go all Dukes when you got a car show. But now I have Bernie here and Corndog the Great. And I have a General Lee being built by a crazy OCD, wonderful man like Nathan Warren at Warren Custom. Life is good. I get my Dukes of Hazzard fixed now pretty much on a daily basis. But back in the day, it didn't work like that. And it was a rare treat. So I think Corey Eubanks was my very first get of like an actual Dukes of Hazzard star. And I sought him out online and he just replied to me. So this was my first interview. When you hear it, I wasn't great at interviewing quite yet. Well, I was... Come on, Robert. You were good. Just admit it. Okay, I was good. And I did fanboy out a little bit. You don't need to point that out. I know. So we'll close with this. Thanks for listening. Remember, leave a rating if you get this show on iTunes. Please follow us on Instagram. Take a snapshot of you listening and post that on Instagram. And please do consider joining us on Patreon. That's the future. That's where shows like ours can thrive and grow. That's how you build an audience that is a community, not just a bunch of listeners out there in the middle ether. We're a family here, so that's the future. So patreon.com/KF show. Here's Corey Eubanks. We'll see you next week. Today on the Muscle Car Place podcast, we're speaking to a stunt driving legend, actually just a stunt legend in general. For 30 years, he's been sliding cars sideways, backwards, forwards, and through the air on movies like Fast and Furious 5 and Transformers, and on TV shows like The A-Team, The Fall Guy, and my personal favorite, The Dukes of Hazzard. Today we're going to learn all about his career in driving and flying muscle cars, learn what it takes to actually do what he does, and maybe everything in between. So Corey, welcome to the show.
Robert, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so this is a big deal, man. You're a huge deal. You're Corey Eubanks, and you're on this show. And you were just telling me before you didn't know if you don't know where you're going to be week to week or day to day.
Well, Robert, it's very flattering. It's as stunt performers, seldom do we get any recognition for what we do because we're typically doubling the actor. There's a lot of movies I've done that people are oblivious to the fact that I've even been in it or what I did in the film because I was doubling either, Sylvester Stallone or Tom Cruise or Robert De Niro or many other actors. And it's nice every once in a while to be able to tell people what you actually did in the film and what you actually do for a living, because it's quite unique. And like you were saying, there's a lot of times that when my phone rings, I don't know where it's going to take me. I might end up in Austria, like when we were doing Night and Day in Sevilla in Spain, or on Fast and Furious 5, going down to Puerto Rico, or out in the heat in the desert in Parker, Arizona. And that's part of the beauty of it, not knowing each week where you're going to end up being.
Could we start at the beginning? Where did you get the idea in your head that this is what you wanted to do for a living? Because you started at a pretty young age.
Yes, I did. My father's been in the entertainment business forever. His name is Bob Eubanks. He used to do the Newlywed Game television show, and before that was a radio disc jockey on KRLA. And he was a weekend rodeo cowboy. That was his thing. He used to team rope.
Really?
And there was a place out at Paramount Ranch in Agora Hills. And at Paramount Ranch, there was a roping arena called D. Cooper's. And some of the biggest stunt men in the industry used to go out there on the weekends and rope. I mean, the Terry Leonards, Walter Scott, Billy Burton, Hal Burton, all these legends. And I used to go out there as a little kid and watch them, and when they were team rope, and where they had a Western set behind the roping arena, and they'd go out there and practice high falls out of windows and stair falls, and I knew that these guys were stuntmen, but I didn't know that that was their job. But so it influenced me from when I was like 9 years old. I'm like, oh my God, I want to be a stuntman someday. But I didn't know that you could make a living at it. It was actually what I was going to do is, for a career, I was dead set on being a professional boxer.
Really?
I fought in the Junior Olympics, the Golden Gloves, the Diamond Bell. That was my thing. Now, I had 47 fights as an amateur, and I was actually in my gym in Canoga Park, the Left Hook Gym, and they came in scouting for the Sting 2. And I was kind of showing off on the speed bag because I knew that these movie guys were there and looking for some guys just to be in the background as extras. And I was 17 years old, and they came in and they chose me to be in the movie as just as an extra. But then when I was on the set, I was talking with Mac Davis and Carl Malden and telling them that I wanted to be a professional fighter. And they talked to Ron Stein, the stunt coordinator, and long story short, they got me a part in the movie as playing the part of a boxer.
Cool.
So I got tapped hardly into the Screen Actors Guild. And then I told my dad, more than anything, I want to work on that Dukes of Hazzard TV show. I want to someday jump to General Lee. Dad looked at me out of the corner of his eye, and he goes, you know what? A gentleman by the name of Paul Picard, who's the executive producer of the Dukes of Hazzard, he goes, hired me to do the Newlywed Game. So my dad goes into his office and calls Paul Picard on a Friday night while we were watching the Dukes of Hazzard, has a conversation with him, comes back and says to me, you start work on Monday.
So what was this, in the 80s or the late 70s, or where are you here?
This is 81, 82, somewhere around there.
So you, sight unseen, you get a job to jump probably the most famous car in the world.
Yeah, thank God for nepotism. You know, I mean, my dad got me onto the set, and I'll be honest with you, Robert, for the first 6 months, it was torture. I didn't have any friends. I had no talent. I had no experience. I really had no right to be on that set other than the executive producer put me there. So they knew they could not fire me. So they put me in spots that were potentially going to get me either killed or convince me to quit. So that I started jumping to General Lee. I was the youngest stuntman ever to jump to General Lee. And some of the jumps we did were huge, and a lot of them were experimental. They didn't know if we could jump over a semi-truck trailer lengthwise and how fast to go. And a lot of times they thought, well, if we lose this kid, it's no great loss because he's got no experience and no real talent that we know of. So strap him into the car and see if we can do it. Good God.
I know exactly what you're talking. I know the semi-trailer jump. That's a pretty famous jump. How?
Yeah, it wasn't too successful either. It landed on its windshield.
Ugh. Okay, can you walk us through what it's like to jump in a car? Because as many times as everybody who's ever dreamed of doing that, it's got to be absolutely terrifying, isn't it? Maybe the first time?
Oh, the first time, yeah. The first time I didn't know what to expect, and I was terrified. Also, as I said back then, we were experimenting with not just the jump harness that we used, where you're suspended inside the car by bungee cord. so you don't compress your vertebrae in the back. They were also experimenting with nitrous oxide. And we also would weight the trunk of the car because it was very important to the executive producers to have the General Lee land as flat as possible so it wasn't obvious that it was crumpling the front end of the car because, as you know, a 69 Dodge Charger is a unibody. It's not a complete frame, so it would bend and fold and crinkle very easily. So to make it more convincing to the audience at home that the car was not damaged, they wanted to land flat. So we would weight the trunk, and based on whether it was a 440 or a 383 engine, we would adjust the weight accordingly.
Sure.
And when you're driving on those dirt roads, and they're never perfectly level, and they're never perfectly straight, and you're coming in at pretty high speed, and then you hit the nitrous oxide, it doesn't really propel you forward. It just kind of made the car more squirrely in the rear end because of the additional weight and the tires breaking traction. So in my very first jump, I had nitrous oxide, and they gave me a mark when I was supposed to hit it, which is about 300 feet before the ramp. And it got so squirrely, and I thought, oh, my God, I'm not even going to make it off this ramp. And so, yeah, it was very terrifying. But after a while, and, after 20, 30, 40, 50 jumps, I've done well over 100 to date.
Jeez.
I'm not going to say that I'm completely calm and laxed about it, because I think that when you fall into that comfort zone, that's when you get hurt. But it's an environment that I'm very familiar with now, and I can be very, very calm about it, but still try to be tense enough that your adrenaline's still flowing and you're very aware of what's going on. Otherwise, I think that's when I've seen a lot of the guys get hurt and make mistakes, including myself, when you get too comfortable.
You had mentioned a jump harness. What does that mean? Now, I assume every car you're jumping is a fully roll cage equipped car. Is your harness hooked to that cage then somehow?
Well, the bungee cord is wrapped around the roll bar above your head. It's like a half-inch or a three-quarter, and it's in different lengths. And the harness that you're wearing has D-rings back above your shoulder blades. And you have quick releases that clip into these D-rings. So your butt is like 5 to 6 inches off the seat. And then you put your 5-point harness on and kind of push up against the ceiling to push your butt down into the seat so it's just touching. And that's when you cinch down your lap belt and your shoulder harnesses. You're actually just suspended there, being held up by the bungee cord that's wrapped around the roll bar.
I see.
Does that make sense?
It really does. That answers a lot of questions. Now, you've been jumping the General Lee for a lot longer than just on the TV show, because you've been doing several of the reunion events and things like that later on. Is it different jumping these older cars than it was back in the 80s? Are you having to jump any cars that are rusted out or anything like that?
Oh, yeah. I remember in Bristol, Tennessee, Bristol Motor Speedway, there was one car I jumped, and the trunk was the rust was just corroded, and the trunk, and I even looked at Tommy Trento, the mechanic, who installed the weight box, and I said, is this going to hold? It looks really, oh, no, it'll be fine. Well, a lot of people don't know, obviously, because they haven't done the jump. There's an impact when you hit the jump ramp. These ramps that we use are kicker ramps. They're not a launch ramp. They're not a very smooth, where the transition is very gradual. It's very abrupt, so that it would pop the car into the air and reach your apex in a much shorter distance.
Okay.
Which we needed, because a lot of the places we were going to perform the jumps on the show, we didn't have a very long lead up. We were very cramped, and there was trees and other creeks and rocks and stuff, and we'd have to get to a fast speed in a very short distance and reach a height, 25, 30 feet in a very short distance to get over a barn or a tree or something. So these pop ramps have a lot of impact when the vehicle hits it. And in Bristol, I think this was in 2005, I hit the ramp at probably 70, 75 miles an hour. And the compression from the rear end was so great on those pop ramps that it ripped the weights right through the trunk of the car and shot right through the top of the jump ramp. And the jump ramp is skinned with 3 sheets of 3/4-inch plywood. So it's very thick and it's very strong. But these weights, 475 pounds of weights blasted right through those sheets of plywood like they were paper mache.
Jeez.
And then I left the ramp with no weight, so the car then became very light in the rear end and flipped over and landed on its rooftop, which was not what I wanted to have happen.
Good times.
Yeah, so that was a scary moment. I was like, oh, no, because I'm suspended up at that point. I'm closer to the rooftop, and when you know you're going to land on your rooftop, you want to be as low as possible. And I was like, oh, this isn't going to be good. But I didn't get hurt, and thank God to the roll cages that we've designed and modified throughout the years, they can withstand, those type of impacts.
How about the roll cages? So the Dukes of Hazzard was your first professional experience there. When you get in your first car, how do you know the roll cage is going to work? Do you get to build them yourselves, or do you just have a lot of faith?
No, I didn't. And like you're saying, back then when I first climbed in, I didn't even know a good roll cage from a bad roll cage. I didn't know if they were using 2-inch 120 gauge. I didn't know if it's seamless chromoly steel or if it was black water pipe. I had no idea. And back then in the early 80s, whether we were working on Fall Guy or A-Team or Dukes of Hazzard or Hunter, there was a lot of different designs. There was a lot of things that we said, hey, that didn't work. Let's now add a bar here, or let's put something there, or let's put a gusset. So there was a lot of fine-tuning throughout the 80s when we were doing these big jumps and pipe ramps and cannon rolls. So today, when it comes to average-size vehicle, whether it be a 69 Dodge Charger or a Chevy Suburban or whatever the vehicle would be, I now know based on a car that's around that weight what type of a roll cage I need to have.
Okay.
The only time in the past 28 years I did not know was on Fast and Furious 5. I had a cannon roll a prison bus that is 40 foot long, like a Greyhound bus. Actually, it comes out in the movie this weekend. It's the largest vehicular stunt that's ever been done in the history of filmmaking.
Good Lord.
The vehicle tipped the scales at 42,000 pounds. So
You're nuts.
that's 21 tons. And I was working with one of the very, very best special effects men in the world, Matt Sweeney, and his team, and Mike Duanis, and these guys that build these roll cages. And we were all kind of scratching our heads on how much tubing, what kind of an impact at 60 miles an hour is 21 tons going to do to this cave. We couldn't fathom what that impact was going to be. And so what we actually did when we built the roll cage inside the vehicle, because we moved my steering column into the middle where you walk down the aisle in between the seats. We moved my steering column there and my foot pedals, and then back away from the windshield about 6 feet, and that's where we built my pod, my roll cage pod. But then we built additional above me 4 other roll cages, hoops up above, that when the bus flipped over and it started to crumple in, it would have to hit the secondary cage, collapse that before it would even get to my cage. It was beyond terrifying. I thought I'm either going to go to the hospital or the morgue on this stunt.
Did you go to the hospital? No,
I did not. No, it was very successful. The bus rolled 3.5 times. The director wanted to have it roll at least 1.5.
There you go. That's better.
Yeah, they were just ecstatic. And Mike Gunther, the stunt coordinator, was just the best to work for, the best to work with. And we pulled it off together. This was, like I said, the biggest vehicular stunt to date in the history of filmmaking. I was very, very honored to be asked to do it.
What is it like to live your life? I assume you have a family, and that this is what you do for a profession. Does your family all participate in these type of things too?
You know what? Typically, no. The norm for me is I'm going to work and I'll see you later tonight. If it's not a big deal, I don't tell them. Or I might just say, yeah, I'm going to do a cannon roll, I'm going to do a car jump, or we're doing a T-bone, or we're going to do a little car chase, or maybe we're just going to do something that's not even worth talking about. There have been times I've gone and worked on TV shows or features and come home and my wife and kids don't even ask what I did. This bus stunt, I'm having a hard time even explaining to you how frightened I was. It had never been done before. When nobody had an answer as to how we were going to even get this bus sideways, the steering wheel from lock to lock was 6.5 turns, so we had a quick steer box put on it so I could do it in 2.5. But I had never driven the bus and turned it. It was, hoping not to sound redundant, but it was the most terrifying stunt I've ever done.
It sounds awful.
It was awful, and everybody picked up on it. And my wife and my twins are 3.5 years old, and my oldest daughter, Tyler, she's 23, they all came down, and even my dad, even my father came down into the area where we were filming. And we got a hotel room there. because I think everybody knew that I was going to get hurt. And to what extent we did not know. And a lot of people are oblivious to the fact that on the first take, the first time we did the bus stunt, which was on Friday, everything was going wrong. It was not meant to happen. And Robert, this was before we put in the additional roll cages that I had requested. So everything from my ear monitors that I wear, that I can hear and communicate with people outside of the vehicle, they didn't work. They've worked for me forever. You know, I paid $2,400 for these ear monitors, very best they make, and suddenly they don't work. I'm like, wait a minute, this is weird. Then, as they were preloading the cannons, as I was strapped in, ready to do the stunt, one of the cannons fired prematurely for no reason.
Are these cannons on the bus themselves?
Yeah, it's a 7-foot pole, steel pole, that's 10 inches in diameter. And it's got 59,000 PSI. It's 600 pounds of pressure, but at the top when it comes in, it's pushing with a pressure of 59,000 pounds to push this pole down. And there's 3 of them. There's 2 by the rear axle, and there's 1 up front just behind me off my right side. And I have to hit a button with my foot that's going to activate these ball valves that are going to open up to release all of that air into the cylinder to push the poles into the ground that flip the bus in the air. This all happens within a half of a second.
Okay.
But as they were airing up these with the nitrogen, they were filling these tanks up. One of the ball valves opened prematurely for no reason, so it was a malfunction, and it cost us about 45 minutes. So I'm like, okay, there's the second thing that went wrong. Then the third thing that went wrong was the air pressure in the brakes on the bus. You got to get the air pressure up to 120 PSI before they were released the brakes. We had a leak all of a sudden. There was a leak, and I couldn't get the air pressure to build up. And that took us about a half hour. Then when I took off to do the stunt, and I came in and I slid the bus sideways and hit the button to activate the cannons, only 1 of the 3 cannons fired. And the bus flopped onto its side, and it kind of rolled up onto its back, and then it on its rooftop, and then it flopped back down, and it was very anticlimactic. It was not what anybody wanted. 2 of the cannons didn't fire, only 1. It wasn't enough to get the bus rolling. And so Universal had to make a decision. Do we want to spend another $570,000 to go back and reshoot this and try it again? And they made that decision on Saturday. So they completely rebuilt the exterior of this bus.
So you did it twice.
It was unbelievable to watch these guys, Dennis McCarthy and his guys, these fabricators come in and strip all of these parts off of a brand new bus and put it onto this bus that had been rolled onto its rooftop. And that's when I told them. I sat down, I had a meeting with Mike Gunther, the stunt coordinator, and Matt Sweeney, the special effects man, and I said, you guys, we have to agree that the structure of the bus has already been compromised. It's already been crumpled. My cage has already been damaged because when it rolled over, it hit a boulder. We all still have to agree that we don't know if that cage we have in there is sufficient. We don't know if it's going to withstand this impact. I need to have, for me to feel safe, I need to have some additional roll bars put in there. So we put 570 feet of additional tubing in there within an 18-hour period. It was unbelievable, like ants working on something, just men everywhere, special effects men and fabricators and welders, and they did this all through the night. So then the next morning, and now the next morning it was bright and sunny, everybody had a great attitude, and we did the stunt. And as it rolled, about the second roll, those additional roll bars that I asked for all collapsed. And then when it finally came to a rest on its back, my roll cage had bent and broke in 7 places. So it tells me if I had not had that additional roll bar, those roll bars put in, that I probably would have been in the hospital or the morgue.
It's a good thing things didn't go well the first time, then.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think God works in mysterious ways.
I think so. Well, let's talk about some happy cars, little simple cars to jump. This will be almost impossible to ask, but all the cars you've driven out there, of the muscle cars, do you have any favorites that are the funnest to drive or slide or jump or something like that?
You know what? It will always be, for me, the General Lee. It's like your first love. It's your first car I ever jumped. All the guys on the Dukes of Hazzard, we would qualify, or in order for it to qualify as a jump, it had to be over 100 feet.
Okay.
I mean, we would do mini ramp jumps that were, 75, 80, sometimes 90 feet, but a jump was when you went over 100 feet, 150, The biggest jump I ever did was Nashville Motor Music Speedway was 202 feet. And we're talking from ramp to ground.
Okay.
We're not talking ramp to ramp, and that's a big difference.
Is ramp to ramp a common thing? In the Dukes of Hazzard, I always think that, the car leads in the air and then it hits the ground.
Yeah, that's what they wanted to see because it was supposed to be realistic, that it was jumping and there's no landing ramp, you just land on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what we would, as stuntmen, we would do. And there's a lot of guys today who are building dirt landing ramps and steel and wood, and they would go from ramp to ramp. Well, the compression, the landing is, you hardly feel it at all. I've asked a lot, what does it feel like? I said, well, if you can imagine taking a chair, a recliner or something, it's got some cushion to it, and get on the top of a second-story building and jump off, sitting in the seat. That's what the compression feels like. That's about how high we get at times. But it will always be the General Lee for me that was, I've jumped that car more than any other vehicle. The most unique weeks of my career was I got to jump the General Lee and the Gran Torino on Starsky and Hutch. 2 days apart. So I'm probably the only guy who's ever done that.
How did that come to be?
Well, I was working on the movie Starsky and Hutch, doubling Ben Stiller. Todd Phillips, the director, wanted to have a huge jump at the end of the film to have some end credits.
Yeah.
And I just came back from jumping, was it in Sperryville, Virginia, or it was one of the Duke's conventions. I had to leave to go do the jump, and I jumped the General Lee, and then I came back, and the following day I jumped down in San Pedro in California. I jumped the Gran Torino on Starsky and Hutch.
I know the Torino jump pretty well. How did it fly for you? Was it okay?
You know what? It was all right. It was okay. It wasn't that, to me, it wasn't that big of a jump, but it was the fact that I got to jump those two cars, which are like legends within themselves. I thought this was awesome. But the other car I would say that I'm most proud of to have jumped was that 50 Merc. That was definitely Sylvester Stallone on that film called Cobra.
Yeah, I know that car too. It's another famous car. Yeah.
We actually had 7 of those cars on that movie.
7 of the Mercs?
Yeah, identical. They were all identical.
If you had to tell people, here's the one thing that you'd be most surprised about in stunt work, do you have one? Do people ever ask you, what don't we know about the movies that we see? Is there anything that you would say, here, only an insider would know this?
Yeah, you know what? It's interesting you should ask that. I think people are aware that when you're making a movie or a television show, you have rehearsals with the actors, and they block out the scene, and they work out where they're going to hit their marks for camera, so things are in focus. They do several rehearsals, and then they have several takes, several chances when they're rolling film to get it right. Well, that didn't work. Okay, let's cut cameras. Let's go again. This is take 2. Try it this way and take 3, take 4, take 5. I worked on Midnight Run with Robert De Niro, Charles Grodin. 47 takes to get a shot right. 47 opportunities. In the stunt world, the norm is we don't have a rehearsal on some of these big stunts. We have a discussion of what we're going to attempt to do, and we got one shot to do it.
Yeah.
And if you screw up, if you miss your mark, if you don't do something right, you have a chance of hurting someone else or hurting yourself or ruining a shot that's going to cost several $100,000 or more to redo. So what I think the majority of people out there watching movies and TV shows are oblivious to the fact that there's a great deal of pressure to get it right on the first try, the first attempt, and you have not had a rehearsal.
You guys do the expensive parts. Yeah.
That's the nerve-wracking. There are some stunts that we do have several rehearsals, but to try to get it right, okay, this is the timing, okay, now let's do it. And sometimes things go wrong. Sometimes your timing, I thought you were going this way when I was going to go that way, and and we had mistakes and accidents. And I've lost 9 friends in the business. I've lost 9 fellow stuntmen that I worked with and admired and looked up to and were my friends. And so it happens. I think people are oblivious to that as well. It is an occupation that can take your life.
Have you ever thought about stopping the profession, or has that never occurred to you?
Yes, it has occurred to me, and I have thought about it. And I actually took a different direction there for a while and started directing episodic television. I directed a couple of features that I wrote It was hard for me to be on the sidelines. It was hard for me to watch guys that I'd started out within the business and my peers still doing the stunts, and still I missed it, and I was not very happy. And so got, turned into, directing television is not for me. I still want to do stunts. Now that I'm 49 years old, February I'm going to be 50. I need to start thinking about toning down what types of stunts I do, and maybe get back into stunt coordinating and second unit directing. But I think I'm always going to want to jump in a car and go do a car chase. I'm not going to try to go flip over any 20-ton buses anymore, but or even I don't know that I'll ever jump to General Lee again, to tell you the truth. I don't know. But I think I'm always going to want to go out and do some stunts and slide some cars and crash them, and I'm always going to have that desire to do that. I think until I'm in my 60s.
Yeah. It's interesting to hear you speak, because you've never referred to the General Lee once in our interview as a Dodge Charger. To you, it's the General Lee. It's a character, a person, almost.
Oh, yeah, it is, and it's and it's funny. A lot of people don't know that sometimes we use the 68 and change the taillights to make it look like the 69, but it's a Dodge Charger, but no, it's all the General Lee. And to us, to the stunt guys, we call it a GL.
Okay.
A GL.
Got it.
But we did have our favorites. There were our favorites. Tommy Cimento, who was the head mechanic on the show for the whole duration of the series, would take a glass engraver. On the driver's side, on the back window, he would scratch in a number, whether it was 08 or if it was 26 or 32 or 77. These are all cars that we knew. Otherwise, they all look the exact same, right? They're all orange with an 01 and flag on the top. We would know by the back of what car it was, whether it was a 440 or a 383, and which one was a good car, which was a backup. So we all had our favorite cars. And they were different. They all had their own little characters to them.
How many of those cars were manual transmission cars? Were there any?
No.
They're all automatics?
Yes.
Yep.
I never climbed in one that was anything but an automatic.
Before we go here, if somebody's listened to this whole thing, and even after the bus flip, they've said, I think I'd like to do that for a living. How do you get into doing stunt work for a living? I mean, people may not have a clue what it pays. They may not know anything about it. But what would you recommend to somebody?
I get asked the question all the time. How do I become a stuntman? Or a stuntwoman? How do I get into the business? It's changed from when I got started. And of course, as you know, I was fortunate. My father opened up a door for me. But today, with the technology that we have, it's having your own stunt reel. It's showing what your talents are, and maybe a 2.5 to 3 minute stunt reel that shows whatever it might be, rappelling high falls, motorcycles, snowboarding, whatever it is that you have a talent in doing, and putting together a stunt reel. Get it on YouTube and get it out there so people can see what your talents are. There's always going to be a need for stuntmen with talent. Okay, now you got the talent, but you don't have the experience. Also, educating yourself about camera, about different size lenses. But it's something, I've been doing this 28 years. I'm still learning. But for people to get into the business, you have to have something that can show them, because actions do speak louder than words. You can sit there and say, I could jump a motorcycle, but no one you've ever seen. Hey, here, let me show you. The advice I give is to people who ask me, I say, you've got to make a stunt reel that is entertaining, that shows off your talents, and then you've got to get it out there that stunt coordinators and second unit directors and fellow stuntmen can see.
Okay.
And a way to get in touch with you, whether it's your own website or a phone number.
You almost market yourself like, here's an example, like right when really good high school football players are about to go to college. At this point, they have to put together a full demo reel, website, contact information. You got to show what you can do.
Great analogy. That's exactly same thing.
Got it.
But the thing is, though, Robert, and because of technology, the demand for stuntmen and for stuntwomen has dissipated. It's not because now with the CGI and oh no, we're not going to actually have that explosion right there next to the guy. We'll just shoot it in front of a green screen and we'll use the actor and we'll superimpose the explosion in post. There's a lot of that has really lessened the need for professional stuntmen. And also in the television world, it's so much reality-based right now, which back in the 80s when I was extremely busy in television, the 1 hour format was action drama.
Right.
There were action shows. Today it's, reality this or a cooking show.
There are a lot of cooking shows. What is auto barrel racing? I'd come across that when I was preparing for this interview.
Yeah, Auto Barrel Racing is a brand new racing league that I came up with the concept when I was working on Fast and Furious 2 in South Beach, Miami. And we had to race around some barrels at the end of the street. And I thought, wow, there's something here. And there's always been kind of like in mixed martial arts, there's always been, well, who's better, a karate guy or a boxer, or the boxer or the wrestler or jiu-jitsu or whatever. So I thought, same thing in the car world. Which is better, the imports or the muscle cars? Domestic muscle versus import. What is a better car, you know? And that's kind of what was in Fast and Furious 2. You know, they were racing, you know, the different cars against each other. And I thought, wait a minute. If we take 3 55-gallon barrels and put them in a straight line, 100 feet apart, someone who will have 750 horsepower in their car really isn't going to be able to utilize all of that horsepower in just 100 feet. So it makes the other guy who's got maybe 300 horsepower, it makes it fair to him. So I invented this sport, the ABR, Auto Barrel Racing, and if you and I were racing, you run what you bring. You bring any type of car you want. It could be all-wheel drive, rear-wheel drive, whatever you want, nitrous oxide, whatever you feel is going to win the race.
Okay.
And when we take off from the starting line, and it's not a traditional Christmas tree, it just goes from red to green within a 10-second period. So when you get up to the starting line, and I get up to the starting line, and the light turns red, we know within 10 seconds it's going to turn green.
Okay.
When it turns green, we both take off. The first barrel is 100 feet in front of us. You have the option to circle the barrel either to your left or to the right, driver's choice. And you have to do a complete 360 around this barrel. But once you've done that, every other barrel, you have to circle the other direction before you cross the finish line. So it's a great deal of throttle control. It's kind of a combination of drag racing and drifting mixed together. Yet the guys who come from a background of being drag racers can't really maneuver their vehicles around the barrels very well. They're getting better, but that's not what they do. They drive straight.
Yeah.
And the guys who drift, you know, sliding cars sideways, they pitch their cars out way too wide around these barrels, and they take up too much real estate. I've seen it's the guys who can come in very tight to the barrel, circle the barrel very, very close, are getting the fastest times, and we're talking $5,000. That's what they win at these races.
So you've got sponsorship and money behind this then?
No, I have funded this sport from the very beginning, from my very first race, which was in Houston, Texas. And then I've had a couple up in the Dallas Port, up in Washington. I had one in Angel Stadium in Anaheim. I had the last one was at Hollywood Park on November 20th. But no, I've been funding this myself, trying to build up the sport so eventually I can attach some sponsors to it.
I've got to imagine that'll happen. I'll talk to some of my car buddies and see what we can do. That's cool.
Oh, that would be awesome.
That's cool. Well, Corey, thank you very, very much for the time. Do you have a fan website or something people can use to follow you or something like that?
Like everyone else out there, I've got a Facebook.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Just Corey Eubanks on Facebook. But I'm my autobarrelracing.com. I have that website.
Well, I'll put a link to both of those in the show notes, and thank you again very much. And for me personally, as a little kid watching the General Lee fly, thanks for making the car fly. It changed my childhood.
Well, I'm glad I had some influence, Robert, and it's been a real pleasure. Thank you for having me on your show.